This is a demonstration video that will show you how to stitch a fly front zipper and using a jean zipper with metal teeth. So, and this is your typical jean zipper. You'll notice that the zipper tape is a little bit tighter, and our zipper itself is a lot more it's more heavy duty, which is why you typically put them in jeans as opposed to like trousers or like more dress slacks and stuff like that. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to identify the right side and the left side of our shorts. And hopefully when you sew these, or when you cut them out with right sides together so you have a definite right and left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this hold the sample up to me. Now this edge that has the notch on it, that's going to run along the center front of your body. So go ahead and hold it up to your body with the right side out, right, the fashion side of the fabric facing outward. And this is my right piece. So I'm going to go ahead and take a pencil and I'm just going to make an R on it. So I know that this is right, and just to double check myself, I'm going to hold this side up, and yep, this is my left side. So I'm just going to go ahead and put an L on this fabric somewhere. Okay, so now I won't get confused. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're first going to start with our right piece, our right front of the fabric, and we want to make sure that we have the marking spot or the mark point identified. And I don't know if you can see on my sample here, but I identified mine with like an X point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a pin up towards the top, because I want to match that up with this point as well on the back side, or the wrong side of the fabric of my left short front. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pin and stick that right through the center of that X that I have marked, so that they should sit right on top of each other. And then I want to line up my samples, matching up the right sides here, matching these up so that I can then close the front crotch seam. So I'm just going to line these up, and I want to make sure that this match point is definitely where I want to be. And then what I'm going to do is I have my markings done here, and I want to stitch from this is the crotch seam that we're finishing, and then we're going to be putting our zipper along where that notch, the double notch area is. And so what I need to do is I need to sew from this under leg seam all the way up to that match, that point there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another pin, and I'm just going to pin the fabric where I have that marking pin in place. I'm just going to pin that there so that my fabric lays flat, so I won't have the ball of the pin underneath. And then I'm just going to start at the edge of my fabric here, if I can grab my my top thread, and I'm just going to stitch this closed. Now I have my 5/8 inch markings put on here, so I'm just going to follow my 5/8 inch markings, and I'm going to back stitch at the front as well as at the back of that seam. And since this is curved, you want to make sure that you go slow, making sure that you match up that point here. Okay, and this is, again, we're using our regular stitch length of 2.5. And as I approach that mark point that close my crotch seam up, I'm going to go ahead and do a back stitch there, maybe grabbing about 2 to 3 back stitches, and then trim that away. So just to reiterate, what we did was we closed the crotch seam of the front part of the shorts. Now we're not doing any back part of the shorts, but that's the first step of closing the front crotch seam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the top, which is my left piece. I'm going to fold this back and just kind of down and out of the way, so that I can access this fabric underneath. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a hold of my fly facing piece, which you cut one of, and then you also cut one of interfacing, and that was interfaced to the back. So if you haven't gone ahead and interfaced that yet, I would do so at this time. Then what we want to do is we want to match up our notches, both on the fly facing as well as with our sample here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this together, and again you want to make sure that you have right sides together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put some pins in here. And I also marked my 5/8 inch seam allowance along this edge too. So might be a good idea if you didn't take some time to do that, to maybe go ahead and just put a couple markings in for your own, just I don't know, mental sanity probably. I think I've marked a lot more than what I have probably ever in the past, just because you know, taking the time to do those notches really does help quite a bit. Oh, and I also want to just make sure I mean, I'm sure you guys have already switched to this, but we're using our regular presser foot, not our zipper foot at this time. And I'm just going to make sure that all my knobs are kind of tight up in that area. So if you need, I would check to make sure your presser foot arm is tight. So go ahead and pull, like just screw that screw that's kind of holding everything in on the left, because I've noticed that in class sometimes those get a little loose as we sew with them. So what we're going to do is, again, we want to make sure that the left front part of the short is way out of the way, and we want to put a pin in just right at the bottom of that match point, so where everything kind of meets. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just sew at 5/8 of an inch from this raw edge on the right hand side, on the side of the fabric where that double tab is, or where that notch of fabric kind of sticks out. And we're going to do some back stitching at the top and bottom of this stitch. And again, we're stitching at that 3.5 stitch length. So I'm going to go slow and make sure that I'm running that raw edge of the fabric right along the 5/8. And I also have my markings done, so that just kind of you know, just reiterates the fact that I'm stitching properly. When I get to those pins, I'm going to pull them out. And then as I'm getting close to this like match point, I definitely want to make sure that I don't go beyond where that pin is in place. So if you want to, go ahead and just use your balance wheel, your hand crank, to make sure that you end up where you want to very slowly. So I did a couple back stitches there, and then I'm going to raise up my needle and trim up my threads. And if for any reason you did go into that to the right or to the left side of the short, like you can just open up this here to make sure you didn't. Mine was pretty close, but I didn't actually grab it, so that's pretty good. And then what we want to do next is we want to go ahead and trim and grade this seam allowance here that we just made. I'm going to go ahead and trim these thread tails at the top. So trimming, just to go over some terminology here, trimming means to cut things at the same angle or the same level. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim off maybe about 1/4 of an inch from this 5/8 inch seam allowance. And when I get down to kind of that matching point, I'm just going to make sure that I trim both the shorts and the fly facing. So if you need to just trim them one at a time, that's fine too, and then you can just kind of angle it back into that crotch seam. And then what you're going to do is you're going to grade. And grading means that one level of whatever you're cutting is shorter than the other. So I'm going to grade my facing piece. So that means that now I'm going to trim that seam allowance down to about an 1/8, I would say, or between an 1/8 and maybe 1/4. So I'm just trimming that facing piece, the piece that has the interfacing attached to it. I'm just trimming that down now, just trimming that about an 1/8 of an inch off here. So I'm going to do a quick close-up of how that should look. Is that you should have this multi-level trimming involved here. And then what we want to do is we want to open out the facing. So we want to open these pieces up, and then we want to press the seam allowances away from the garment. So we want to press these seam allowances back towards that facing piece, back towards that interfacing. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and stop and do this quick press, and then we will pick things up by go ahead and applying that zipper.